When Daniel Rivera first drove his moving truck into Oakwood Estates, he thought he had struck gold. The neighborhood was everything he and his wife Maria had dreamed of. Tall oak trees lining the streets, children riding bikes without a care, and rows of two-story brick homes that looked straight out of a magazine. It seemed safe, peaceful, and the kind of place where he could finally settle after years of city noise and cramped apartments. But the first hint that Oakwood was not quite as perfect as it appeared came even before Daniel unpacked his boxes. As he backed his truck carefully into the driveway, a silver Lexus SUV rolled slowly to a stop in front of his house. The tinted window lowered, and a perfectly manicured hand with crimson nails rested on the doorframe. "Excuse me," a woman's voice called out. Daniel walked closer, smiling politely, expecting a friendly greeting. Instead, he was met with the piercing eyes of a woman in her late 50s, her platinum blonde hair perfectly styled, her pearl earrings gleaming even in the afternoon sun. "I'm Linda Crawford," she announced, her tone sharp, as though it should mean something, "president of the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association." Daniel extended his hand. "Nice to meet you. Enough of that," she cut him off. "I know who you are. The Riveras, 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath. You closed last Thursday." She topped a clipboard resting on the passenger seat. "I make it a point to know everything about my community." Daniel lowered his hand awkwardly. "Well, we're glad to be here. Looks like a wonderful neighborhood." Linda gave a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It is when people follow the rules. I assume you've read the HOA handbook?" "We skimmed it," Daniel admitted. Her smile thinned further. "Skimming leads to violations. Violations lead to fines. And fines lead to problems. I suggest you review it carefully." Without waiting for a response, she rolled her window up and drove away. Maria, who had been watching from the porch, raised her eyebrows. "Well, she seems welcoming." Daniel chuckled, trying to brush it off. "Every neighborhood has one of those people, right? We'll be fine." But in the weeks that followed, Daniel realized Linda Crawford wasn't just one of those people. She was Oakwood's self-appointed queen, and she ruled with an iron fist wrapped in a designer glove. At first, it was small things. A bright orange notice tucked under his doormat that read, "Trash can visible from street, $25 fine." Daniel had placed it neatly against the side of his garage, but apparently that wasn't enough. A week later, mailbox paint fading, $40 fine. He inspected his mailbox, which looked perfectly fine to him. A small chip in the paint at the bottom was apparently worth $40. Then, improperly coiled garden hose, $30 fine. Daniel gritted his teeth as he reread the notice. The hose had been looped neatly on the side of the house, but according to Linda's handbook, it had to be wrapped uniformly and hung at least 12 inches off the ground. "Are you kidding me?" Daniel muttered. Maria tried to soothe him. "Maybe if we just follow her rules for a while, she'll leave us alone." But that hope was shattered one evening when Daniel spotted his trash can knocked over in the street. At first, he thought it was the wind, but the next night, it happened again, then again. Always at night, always knocked over in the exact same way. Frustrated, Daniel installed a cheap security camera above his garage. A few nights later, as he reviewed the grainy footage on his phone, he froze. There, in the glow of a streetlight, was a familiar figure. Platinum blonde hair, clipboard under an arm, and the unmistakable Lexus parked a few feet away. Linda Crawford. She wasn't just fining him, she was sabotaging him. Daniel stormed into the kitchen, phone in hand. "Maria, look at this." His wife peered over his shoulder. Is that Linda?" Daniel said, "Caught red-handed. She's been knocking over our trash can just so she can fine us." The next day, Daniel confronted her as she drove by. He waved her down, phone ready to show the video. "Linda, we need to talk." She lowered her window, unfazed. "Make it quick. I have a meeting." "I know it was you knocking over my trash can. I have video proof." He held up his phone. Linda's eyes flicked to the screen,
then back to him. For a split second, Daniel thought he saw a flash of fear, but then she smirked. "Maybe you should invest in sturdier trash cans, ones that don't fall over so easily." "Don't play games with me," Daniel snapped. She tilted her head, her smile never wavering. "Careful, Mr. Rivera. The rules are the rules. If you can't handle Oakwood's standards, perhaps this isn't the right community for you." Then she drove off, leaving Daniel fuming in the middle of the street. That night, he found his mailbox dented. A few days later, his solar lights were ripped from the ground, and as if on cue, another violation notice appeared. Yard not in compliance, $50 fine. Daniel realized this wasn't about rules anymore. Linda wasn't trying to uphold standards, she was trying to break him, and he wasn't about to let her win.
Daniel sat at the kitchen table, his hands gripping a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. The soft hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the room until Maria walked in, still half asleep, and sat across from him. "You're up early," she murmured. "I didn't sleep," Daniel admitted. "I kept thinking about Linda. She's not gonna stop. She's just obsessed." Maria frowned. "So what do we do? Keep recording her? Maybe call the police?" Daniel shook his head. "Without clear evidence of damage, they'll just say it's a neighbor dispute, and Linda's good at twisting things. She'll make me look like the problem." He leaned forward, his voice low. "If she wants to play games, fine, but this time, I'll be the one setting the rules." Maria tilted her head. "Daniel, what are you planning?" A slow grin spread across his face. Something she'll never see coming. That weekend, Daniel drove to a hardware store 2 towns over where no one from Oakwood would recognize him. He bought a set of reinforced concrete planters, each designed to look like ordinary decorative trash bins. With the help of a neighbor who quietly sympathized with him, Daniel modified one of them, lining the inside with steel rebar and filling it halfway with cement. When he was done, it looked like any other large plastic trash can. Black lid, smooth sides, nothing suspicious. But unlike the real one, this weighed close to 200 pounds. He positioned it at the edge of his driveway, exactly where the HOA required. The real trash can, lighter and easier to use, he kept hidden behind the side gate. That night, Daniel set his cameras to record. Just after midnight, headlights swept across the street. The familiar Lexus rolled slowly into view, pausing in front of his driveway. Linda Crawford stepped out, clipboard in hand, heels clicking softly against the pavement. She looked around once, then strutted toward the trash can. With a smug smile, she shoved it hard with her hip, expecting it to topple over easily, like always. Instead, nothing. The reinforced bin didn't budge an inch. Linda frowned, stepped back, and shoved again, harder. The can wobbled slightly, but stayed upright. Confused, she leaned down and pushed with both hands. Still nothing. Her frustration grew. Muttering under her breath, she gave it one final kick with the point of her heel. The pain shot up her leg instantly. She stumbled, cursed, and glanced nervously around. Then, scowling, she limped back to her Lexus and drove off. Daniel, watching from his phone inside the house, nearly laughed out loud. "Got you," he whispered. But that was just round 1. 2 nights later, Linda returned, this time with a different tactic. Instead of getting out, she used her SUV. With a quick jerk of the steering wheel, she rammed the front bumper into the bin. The sound echoed through the quiet street, a sharp thunk of plastic against reinforced concrete. The trash can didn't fall. Instead, the Lexus recoiled slightly, its bumper bending inwards with a visible dent. Linda sat frozen for a moment, gripping her steering wheel. Then, furious, she backed up, slammed the gas, and rammed it again. This time, the crash was louder, and pieces of her grille cracked and scattered onto the road. Daniel, wide awake and recording every second, couldn't contain his laughter. "She's destroying her own car!" Maria came running. "What happened?"
He turned the screen toward her and tears of laughter in his eyes. "She just hit the fake trash can! Twice!" Maria gasped. "She's insane! She's actually insane!" The next morning, Daniel went outside casually. Sure enough, the reinforced bin stood proudly in place, not even scratched. But on the street, he noticed a trail of black paint and a few plastic shards, clear evidence of Linda's late-night tantrum. By mid-afternoon, the HOA sent him another violation notice. Unauthorized trash receptacle, $75. Daniel chuckled bitterly. Of course, she can't admit defeat, so now the bin is unauthorized. Maria crossed her arms. "So what's the plan? Do we fight her on every fine?" Daniel shook his head. "No, fighting fines is what she expects. Instead, I'm going to keep recording. Let her dig her own grave. Every time she tries something, I'll have proof." But Linda wasn't done. That week, Daniel found his sprinkler system mysteriously damaged, flooding part of his lawn. 2 days later, someone left an anonymous note on his door. "Move out or else." Daniel had no doubt whose handwriting it was. What Linda didn't know, however, was that Daniel had already upgraded his cameras, adding 2 more hidden ones near his mailbox and lawn. And soon enough, those cameras would catch something far more damaging than a dented SUV. Something that would not only end Linda's reign, but expose a secret she had spent years hiding.
The following week, Daniel lived in a strange mix of irritation and anticipation. Every time he stepped outside, he wondered what new sabotage Linda would try next. But at the same time, he knew his cameras were now catching everything, every angle, every late-night move. On Tuesday evening, he reviewed the footage from the night before while sipping his tea. What he saw nearly made him spit it out. Linda hadn't just stopped to glare at his house like usual. She had parked her Lexus across the street, walked quietly up to his mailbox, and slipped a folded envelope inside. Daniel grabbed a flashlight and hurried outside. Inside his mailbox, just as the footage showed, was the envelope. The words scrawled in blocky, aggressive handwriting read, "We don't want you here. Leave before things get worse." Maria's face paled when Daniel showed her. "She's threatening us now?" Daniel nodded grimly. "This is more than HOA nonsense. This is harassment, and it's illegal." But instead of rushing to the police, he smiled. "And now I've got proof." That night, Linda made another appearance. This time, Daniel almost couldn't believe what he was watching. She carried a heavy-looking binder tucked under her arm, the kind HOA board members often used. But instead of keeping it safe, she casually walked up his driveway, glanced around, and tossed it into the bushes near his porch. Then she hurried back to her car and drove off. Daniel froze. Why would she throw away a binder? Curiosity gnawed at him until he finally went outside and searched the bushes. Sure enough, there it was, a thick HOA record book stuffed with receipts, notes, and payment logs. Maria gasped when he brought it inside. Why would she dump this here? Daniel carefully flipped through the pages. At first, it looked like normal HOA bookkeeping, meeting minutes, lawn care invoices, maintenance schedules. But then, he noticed something odd. Certain numbers didn't add up. There were duplicate invoices for the same landscaping job signed off on the same date. Several maintenance projects were listed under fake company names, none of which existed in town records. And the total? Tens of thousands of dollars skimmed out of HOA funds. Maria put her hand over her mouth. She's stealing! Oh my God, Daniel! Linda's been embezzling money! Daniel leaned back in his chair, stunned but also exhilarated. This explains everything. She's not just petty, she's desperate. If we expose this, she's finished. But he also knew Linda wasn't stupid. If she realized the binder was missing, she would come looking for it. Sure enough, 2 nights later, Daniel caught her on camera again. This time, Linda snuck into his yard with a flashlight, crawling around in the bushes where she had tossed the binder. She searched frantically, her expression growing more panicked by the minute. When she came up empty, she stomped back to her car, muttering under her breath. Daniel smiled. He had the evidence. He had the leverage. But he also knew the battle wasn't over. Linda wasn't the kind of person to give up quietly. The next morning, the HOA sent Daniel a letter accusing him of tampering with association records. Daniel laughed bitterly. So that's her move. She lost the binder, so now she's pretending I stole it. Maria shook her head. She's unbelievable. But Daniel, what if she finds another way to come after us? What if she escalates? Daniel looked out the window at the reinforced trash bin still standing strong by the curb. She already has. And now it's my turn to escalate.
The HOA's letter accusing Daniel of tampering was the last straw. He held the envelope in his hands, shaking his head in disbelief. "She's really trying to flip this on me," he muttered. "She thinks if she shouts the loudest, people will believe her." Maria frowned. "So, what do we do? If she convinces the board, they might try to fine us, or worse." Daniel leaned back in his chair, his eyes glinting with determination. "We don't panic, we plan." That evening, he spread the binder across the dining table. He took pictures of every page, every suspicious invoice, every duplicate charge. He saved them on multiple flash drives and emailed backups to himself. Then he made a neat little folder labeled Evidence, HOA Theft. "This way," he said, sliding one of the drives across the table to Maria, "if she ever tries to destroy the binder or twist the story, we'll still have proof." Maria nodded nervously. "So, what's the next step?" Daniel smiled. "We set a trap. She's so obsessed with control, she won't be able to resist taking the bait." The trap wasn't physical this time. It was informational. Daniel knew Linda loved to parade her authority in front of other neighbors. So he printed out a few select pages from the binder, just enough to hint at the embezzlement, and left them in a manila envelope on his porch by accident. Then he positioned a camera directly across the street to get the perfect angle. It didn't take long. 2 nights later, Linda approached again, flashlight in hand. She spotted the envelope, looked around, and snatched it up like a raccoon stealing food. Daniel watched live from his phone, whispering, "Gotcha." The next morning, an anonymous email landed in the HOA members' inboxes, attached with scans of those same suspicious invoices. The message was simple. "Do you know where your dues are really going? Concerned neighbor." By noon, the neighborhood was buzzing. Daniel overheard 2 couples whispering as he walked past them on his way to the mailbox. "Did you see that email?" "Yeah, I always thought the new pool chairs were overpriced." And Linda signed off on all of it. For the first time since moving in, Daniel felt the power shifting. The neighbors weren't looking at him like the troublemaker anymore. Their suspicious glances were aimed at Linda. But Linda wasn't about to crumble quietly. That same evening, she stormed Daniel's driveway in her heels, banging on his door so hard Maria flinched. "Open up, Daniel! I know this is you!" she shrieked. Daniel calmly opened the door just enough to face her. "Linda, what's the problem? Don't play dumb with me." Her face was red, her eyes wild. "You're behind that smear campaign. You think you can make me look bad with forged documents?" Daniel tilted his head.
Forged? That's an interesting choice of words. So you're admitting the documents look like they came from you. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Daniel leaned closer, lowering his voice. You should really be careful about what you throw into other people's bushes. Linda's eyes widened. For a split second, fear flickered across her face before she masked it with anger. You're finished, she hissed. I'll make sure this neighborhood chews you up and spits you out. She stormed off, heels clacking down the driveway. Maria closed the door, her hands trembling. Daniel, she looked like she could actually hurt someone. Daniel locked the door and exhaled slowly. That's exactly what I wanted her to feel. Cornered. But deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. Linda was a fighter, and fighters, when desperate, make mistakes.
The HOA board announced an emergency meeting for Saturday evening. The email said it was to address concerns regarding recent anonymous messages. Everyone in the neighborhood knew exactly what that meant. By the time Daniel and Maria walked into the clubhouse, the room was already buzzing. Neighbors sat in folding chairs, some whispering, others shaking their heads. Linda was at the front, standing tall in her designer blazer, clutching a thick folder like a shield. Daniel took a seat near the back, his phone recording discreetly in his pocket. Maria squeezed his hand. "Are you ready?" she whispered. "More than ready," Daniel replied. The meeting began with the board president, a quiet man named Harold, clearing his throat. "We've all seen the emails. Serious allegations have been raised about our HOA finances. Tonight, we want to get clarity." Before he could say more, Linda jumped in. "This is a coordinated attack on me, on your HOA board. Someone," her eyes darted to Daniel, "is trying to undermine the trust we've built here." A voice from the crowd interrupted. "Trust? Linda, are you going to explain why pool furniture costs triple what it should?" Murmurs rippled through the room. Another neighbor chimed in. "And the landscaping contract? Did you really approve $5,000 for shrubs that died 2 weeks later?" Linda's smile faltered, but she pressed on. "Do you think running a community is cheap? These are necessary expenses. You wouldn't understand the complexity." Daniel raised his hand. The room fell quiet. "If it's really that simple, Linda, then you shouldn't mind showing everyone the receipts, right?" Linda stiffened. "The finances are private, only board members." "That's not true," Daniel interrupted calmly. "Homeowners have the right to review how their dues are spent. That's in the bylaws, page 12, section 4. Harold looked uncomfortable, flipping through his own copy. "He's right," he admitted reluctantly. The neighbors leaned in, murmuring louder. Linda's face reddened. "You all don't understand. Do you think I'm stealing from you? Do you think I need your money? I drive a Cadillac Escalade, for God's sake." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Several people actually laughed. Daniel stood slowly, pulling a paper from his folder. "Since you mentioned it, here's an invoice showing HOA funds reimbursing miscellaneous vehicle expenses. Guess whose name is on it? Linda Parsons." He handed the copy to Harold, who squinted at it, then looked up at Linda with wide eyes. "Linda, is this real?" Linda lunged forward, trying to snatch the paper, but Harold pulled it back. Gasps filled the room. "It's fake," she shouted. "He forged it." Daniel's voice remained calm. "Funny thing is, I found it in the HOA's own records binder, the one you keep locked up in your office." Silence fell. The neighbors looked at Linda, then at Daniel, then back at Linda. One woman stood up. "You've been stealing from us." Another man added, "We trusted you with our money." "And you called him the problem?"
Linda's composure cracked. Her hand shook, her voice rising. "You all are ungrateful. Do you know how much work I put into this neighborhood? Do you think anyone else could manage it as well as I have? You should be thanking me." Her rant grew louder, more frantic. She accused Daniel of hacking her files, accused Maria of spying, even accused Harold of conspiring against her. By the end, her voice was hoarse and her face blotchy. Daniel leaned against the wall, watching her implode. He didn't need to raise his voice or argue anymore. She was doing the job for him. Finally, Harold banged the gavel. "Enough. This board will review these accusations thoroughly. Until then, Linda is suspended from all HOA duties." Gasps erupted again. Linda froze, her jaw dropping. "You can't do this. I am the HOA." "No," Harold said firmly. "You're not. The community is." Linda stormed out, slamming the door so hard that it rattled the windows. The neighbors turned to Daniel, some nodding with respect, others patting his shoulder as they filed out. Maria exhaled, relief washing over her face. "You did it," she whispered. Daniel shook his head. "Not yet. She's cornered, but people like her, they don't go down without one last swing." And he was right, because while the neighbors thought the battle was over, Linda was already plotting her next move, one that would drag Daniel into even deeper waters.
The morning after the explosive HOA meeting, Daniel thought things might finally calm down. Linda had been suspended, the neighbors were waking up to the truth, and the weight of constant harassment seemed to lift, if only slightly. But peace didn't last long. At 5:30 a.m., Maria woke to a loud crash outside. Daniel leapt out of bed, pulled on a hoodie, and rushed to the front yard. His reinforced trash can was toppled over, deep scratches across its side. On the pavement lay shards of glass. Someone had smashed a beer bottle against it. Daniel crouched, scanning the road. Fresh tire marks curved across the asphalt, disappearing into the night. Maria came up behind him, shivering in her robe. "Linda," she whispered. Daniel's jaw tightened. He had no proof, but every fiber of him knew it was her. Later that day, a police officer knocked on his door. "Mr. Walker, we received a complaint from a Miss Parsons," the officer said, flipping open a notepad. "She claims you're harassing her and spreading false accusations." Daniel almost laughed. "She stole HOA money. The neighbors saw the proof." The officer shrugged. "Not my place to say. I'm just letting you know there's a report. Be careful." When the cruiser left, Maria turned to Daniel. "She's not giving up. She's trying to turn this on you." Daniel nodded grimly. "That's exactly what she's doing." That night, his doorbell camera caught something chilling. At 1:12 a.m., headlights flashed across his driveway. The footage showed Linda's Escalade pulling up slowly. The car door opened. Linda stepped out, glancing around nervously. She approached Daniel's mailbox, pulled out a can of spray paint, and scrawled a single word across it: "Thief." The next morning, neighbors gathered around the mailbox, whispering and shaking their heads. Some offered sympathetic looks, but others seemed uncertain, confused by Linda's relentless counterattack. Daniel realized she was trying to muddy the waters, to make it look like both of them were guilty, just two neighbors locked in a petty war. If she couldn't win with lies, she'd win with chaos. That afternoon, Daniel met with Harold, the HOA president, in his garage. Harold looked uneasy. "Listen, Daniel," Harold said quietly, "the board's split. Some people want to move forward with an audit. Others, they're scared. Linda's been calling around, threatening lawsuits, saying she'll bankrupt anyone who goes against her." Daniel clenched his fists. "So she's still controlling them? Even after everything?" Harold rubbed his temples. "You've made enemies, Daniel. Not everyone is brave enough to stand up." That night, Daniel made his decision. If Linda wanted war, he would give her one, but on his terms.
He spent hours at his desk, drafting letters, gathering receipts, and organizing every shred of evidence he had. By midnight, he had a full binder labeled Parsons Case File. Maria peeked in. "Are you sure about this?" Daniel nodded. "If she wants to drag me into court, fine. I'll drag her down with the truth." Outside, the neighborhood seemed calm again, but in the shadows, Linda was circling, desperate and dangerous. The battle wasn't over. It was only about to escalate into police investigations, legal threats, and the kind of exposure Linda had never imagined.
2 days later, Daniel's binder of evidence was ready. He wasn't just preparing for himself, he was preparing for the entire neighborhood. If Linda wanted to smear him, fine, but he'd make sure the truth was too loud to ignore. That evening, Harold called an emergency HOA board meeting. "We can't keep living in limbo," he said. "We need to vote on the audit tonight." Daniel wasn't officially on the board, but Harold had invited him to present. As he entered the clubhouse, the room buzzed with tension. Half the neighbors avoided his gaze, clearly nervous. Others, like Mrs. Green and Allen, nodded firmly in support. Linda was there too. She sat at the far end of the table, arms crossed, lips curled into a cold smirk. "Before this circus begins," she announced, "I'd like it noted that Daniel Walker has been harassing me day and night. I have police reports to prove it. He vandalized my reputation, he lied about finances, and I won't sit here while he spreads more filth." Murmurs filled the room. Daniel took a breath, stepped forward, and placed his binder on the table. "With all due respect," he said calmly, "the truth doesn't need theatrics, it needs receipts." He flipped open the binder. Page after page of HOA bank statements, vendor invoices, and emails came spilling out. "This is 6 months of missing funds, $47,000 unaccounted for. Transfers signed by none other than Linda Parsons." The room fell silent. Harold leaned over the papers, adjusting his glasses. These look real." Linda scoffed. "Forged. Completely forged. You think he, some handyman wannabe, knows how to read bank statements? He probably printed these off the internet." Daniel slid another document across the table. "This one isn't from the internet. It's from the HOA's own bank, obtained legally with Harold's signature. Funny thing is, Linda's name matches the withdrawals every single time." Gasps rippled across the board. Even the skeptical members shifted uneasily. Linda's face reddened. "This is a witch hunt. You people can't prove anything." Daniel pulled out a flash drive. "Actually, I can. On this drive is a recording of Linda threatening me outside my home 2 weeks ago, and another clip from my doorbell camera showing her spray painting my mailbox at 1:12 a.m. Should I play it for everyone?" The board members exchanged uneasy glances. "Play it," Allen said firmly. Linda slammed her fist on the table. "This is outrageous. You can't use illegally obtained recordings against me." Daniel smiled faintly. "Funny. You weren't worried about the law when you were vandalizing my property." Harold finally raised his hand. "Enough. We've seen enough. Board members, vote for or against a full financial audit effective immediately." Hands went up, one by one. 3 in favor. 4, 5, 6. Unanimous. Linda sat frozen, her smirk gone. The meeting adjourned in chaos. Neighbors whispered, some glaring at Linda, others rushing to comfort Daniel. As he packed up his binder, Linda stormed past him, her perfume leaving a sharp trail. She leaned close, her voice low and venomous. "You think you've won? This is only the beginning. I have friends you don't even know about." Daniel watched her march into the night, her heels clicking like a countdown clock. Back home, Maria hugged him tightly. "It's over, isn't it?" she asked hopefully. Daniel shook his head. "No, it's just starting. If the audit confirms what I found, Linda isn't just losing the board, she's looking at criminal charges, and she knows it." At that same moment, in a dimly lit diner on the edge of town, Linda sat in a booth with a man in a cheap suit. She slid an envelope across the table. "I need you to dig into Daniel Walker. Every flaw, every mistake, every secret. Find something, anything I can use." The man nodded, tucking the envelope away. Linda leaned back, eyes cold and calculating. If Daniel wanted a war of truth, then she would fight with shadows. And she was just getting started.
The HOA audit had been officially launched, and the whole neighborhood buzzed like a hive. Some people whispered that Daniel was a hero. Others muttered that he had gone too far. But Linda? She was plotting. At home, Daniel tried to focus on work, but the tension never left. Maria noticed the way he paced, checking the blinds more than usual. "You did the right thing," she reminded him gently. "The truth will protect us." But Daniel knew better. The truth wasn't always enough when someone was desperate, and Linda Parsons was desperate. Meanwhile, Linda's private investigator, Rick Mallory, got to work. He was the kind of man who thrived in shadows, thinning hair, leather jacket, always chewing gum like he had a secret. He started small. He staked out Daniel's house, snapping photos whenever Daniel came or went. He trailed him to the hardware store, to the school drop-off line, even to the diner where Daniel sometimes grabbed coffee. After 3 days, he had nothing. Daniel paid his bills, waved to neighbors, lived an utterly normal life. No scandals, no hidden girlfriends, no secret gambling addiction. Linda was furious. "There has to be something," she hissed during a late-night phone call. "Nobody is that clean. Dig deeper. I don't care how much it costs." So Rick dug deeper. He pulled Daniel's public records, tax filings, old addresses. The worst he found was a late car payment from 5 years ago. When he delivered the thin file, Linda exploded. "This is useless. I can't use this against him." Rick shrugged. "Guy's boring. Salt of the earth type. Maybe stop picking on him." Linda's eyes narrowed. "No, if I can't find dirt, I'll make dirt." The next day, Daniel came home to find 2 police cruisers parked outside his house. An officer approached him as he pulled into the driveway. "Mr. Walker, we received an anonymous tip about stolen landscaping equipment being stored on your property. Mind if we take a look?" Daniel's jaw tightened. He had nothing to hide, but he could feel Maria's panic as she clutched the kids inside the doorway. "Of course," Daniel said calmly, unlocking the shed. The officer searched, their flashlights cutting through the dim space. Rakes, hoses, lawnmower, everything was perfectly ordinary. One officer frowned at the report in his hand. "Well, looks like a false alarm. Sorry to bother you, sir." As they left, Daniel noticed a figure at the corner of the street, Linda, standing in her Escalade, pretending to check her phone. She didn't look his way, but he knew. She was behind it. Later that night, Maria broke down. "She's not going to stop, Daniel. She's trying to ruin us." He hugged her tightly. "She's trying, but she doesn't realize something. Every time she pulls a stunt, she gives me more proof." And proof was stacking up. Harold, the HOA president, called Daniel the next morning. "You won't believe this," he said. "The auditors already found inconsistencies in the landscaping contracts, dozens of them. Money paid to a vendor that doesn't even exist." Daniel almost smiled. Linda was slipping. But Linda wasn't done. That same evening, she hosted a casual neighborhood gathering at her house. She lured in as many residents as she could with wine, appetizers, and promises of the real truth about Daniel Walker. Daniel wasn't invited,
but word spread quickly. Mrs. Green filled him in the next day. "She called you a liar, Daniel. Said you're staging this whole thing to take over the HOA yourself. She said you've been installing illegal sprinkler systems and charging homeowners extra without their knowledge." Daniel laughed bitterly. "Illegal sprinklers? That's her angle?" Mrs. Green sighed. "Some people believed her, others didn't, but she's fighting dirty. You should be ready." Daniel was ready. Because just as Linda was fabricating stories, the auditors were uncovering facts, and facts were heavier than lies. Still, the war wasn't over. Linda was cornered, and cornered people were dangerous. That night, as Daniel walked to his truck, he noticed something strange. His tires, every single one, had been slashed. The faint sound of laughter echoed from down the street, where Linda's Escalade idled for a moment before driving off. Daniel clenched his fists. She had crossed another line. But this time, he had a witness. A neighbor across the street had captured the whole thing on a security camera, and Daniel knew exactly what he would do with it.
The morning after his tires were slashed, Daniel wasn't even angry. He was strangely calm, because for once, Linda had made a mistake too big to hide. The neighbor across the street, Mr. Caldwell, showed up at Daniel's door carrying a USB stick. "Caught the whole thing on my Ring camera," he said with a grim smile. "Thought you might need this." Daniel plugged it into his laptop, and there it was. Crystal clear footage of Linda stepping out of her Escalade, crouching by his truck, and driving a knife into each tire with cold precision. When the job was done, she casually tossed the knife into her SUV and drove away like nothing happened. Maria gasped. "She's insane. She's actually insane." Daniel nodded slowly. "She just handed me the final piece." He didn't go to the police right away. Instead, he made copies of the footage. One for himself, one for the HOA auditors, one for Harold, the president, and one more for good measure, tucked safely away. By noon, whispers were spreading around the neighborhood. Someone had leaked the footage. Neighbors passed phones around, shaking their heads in disbelief. "Did you see that?" Mrs. Green exclaimed. "Caught red-handed." "Linda? Slashing tires? That's not leadership, that's lunacy," Mr. Lopez spat. By evening, the once loyal supporters of Linda were gone. She had gone too far, and the neighborhood was done defending her. But Linda wasn't about to admit defeat. At the next HOA meeting, she stormed into the community hall, head high, lipstick fierce, as if nothing had happened. "This so-called video evidence is fake. Deep fakes. Do you all even understand how easy it is to manipulate video these days? Daniel Walker is trying to frame me because he wants control of the HOA funds." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some looked unsure. Technology was tricky. Could it be true? That's when Harold, the president, stood. "Linda, the auditors already confirmed you authorized payments to a vendor that doesn't exist. Now we have this video. Are you really going to stand here and call us all fools?" The room went silent. Linda's face flushed, but she didn't back down. "This is harassment. You're all conspiring against me. None of you appreciate the work I've done for this community. The beautification projects, the events. Paid for with stolen money," someone shouted from the back. Linda's voice cracked as she tried to regain control. "This is all lies. Lies spread by a man with a grudge." All eyes turned to Daniel. He stood calmly, holding a folder. "I don't need to spread lies, Linda. The truth is heavy enough." He placed copies of invoices, screenshots of the video, and the auditor's preliminary findings onto the table. "The evidence is here. It speaks for itself." Linda's composure cracked. She slammed her fists on the table. "You'll regret this, Daniel. All of you will regret this." But her threats rang hollow. The room was no longer with her. Harold cleared his throat. Effective immediately, Linda Parsons is suspended from her duties pending the outcome of the audit. Security footage and financial records will be handed over to law enforcement. The vote was unanimous. Linda stormed out, her heels clicking furiously against the tile, but her empire had crumbled. Daniel walked home that night feeling lighter than he had in months. Maria hugged him tightly, whispering, "It's finally over." But Daniel wasn't so sure, because he knew Linda, and Linda wasn't the type to walk away quietly. And he was right. The very next morning, Daniel received a letter slipped under his door. No postage, no return address, just a single sentence in red ink. "If I go down, you're coming with me."
The letter in red ink sat heavy in Daniel's hands. He read the words over and over. "If I go down, you're coming with me." Maria was pale. "She's threatening you." Daniel folded the note calmly. "No, she's panicking, and panicked people make mistakes." The following week, the HOA held what was supposed to be its final audit review. The community center was filled to the brim. Neighbors who had avoided meetings for years showed up, eager to see the spectacle. Linda arrived late, flanked by a lawyer who looked as though he regretted every life choice that had led him here. She was dressed in black, pearls at her neck, her eyes blazing like a cornered animal. The auditors presented their findings. Over $47,000 was misappropriated from HOA funds, the lead auditor announced, his voice echoing through the hall. The money was funneled through a fake landscaping vendor and used for personal expenses, including luxury car payments, spa treatments, and private shopping sprees. Gasps and angry whispers filled the room. In the furthermore, we have surveillance footage corroborating intentional property damage by Mrs. Parsons, including acts of harassment and vandalism directed at residents. Daniel remained silent, arms folded. The evidence was speaking for itself. Linda shot to her feet. "This is outrageous. I have served this neighborhood for years, and this is how I'm repaid? With lies? With betrayal?" Her lawyer tugged her sleeve, whispering frantically, but she shoved him away. "No, they need to hear me. They need to know the truth." She turned on Daniel, her voice rising. "This man is the real problem. He's been plotting against me since the day he moved in. He staged these videos, he hacked the accounts, But then Harold, the HOA president, held up a hand. "Enough, Linda. We've heard enough. The evidence has been sent to the district attorney's office. This isn't an HOA issue anymore. It's a criminal matter." The silence that followed was deafening. Two uniformed officers stepped forward from the back of the hall. Linda's eyes widened as they approached. No, this isn't happening. You can't do this to me. I am this neighborhood." "You were," Harold said coldly. Linda's pearl necklace broke as she thrashed against the officers, beads scattering across the floor like tiny drops of her crumbling empire. The neighbors watched in stunned silence as she was let out in handcuffs, screaming Daniel's name like a curse. In the weeks that followed, life slowly returned to normal. The HOA appointed an interim treasurer, the missing funds were recovered through a settlement, and Linda Parsons became a name whispered only in gossip over fences and driveways. One evening, Daniel and Maria sat on their porch watching the sunset. "Feels strange, doesn't it?" Maria murmured. "The street is quiet, peaceful, for the first time in a long while." She leaned against him. "Do you think she'll ever come back?" Daniel shook his head. "She'll have plenty of time to think about it where she's going." Just then, their neighbor, Mrs. Green, strolled by with her dog. "Well, Daniel, you sure showed her. Remind me never to get on your bad side." They laughed, and for the first time, it didn't feel forced. Weeks later, Daniel received one final envelope in the mail. Inside was no threat, no venom, just a legal document, a check, signed as part of the settlement for damages caused by Linda Parsons. Maria's jaw dropped. "Daniel, we could finally renovate the kitchen with this." He chuckled. Justice tastes even better with new countertops. They clinked glasses that night not just for the money, not even for the victory, but for the peace they had fought so hard to reclaim. And as Daniel looked out at the neatly lined trash cans under the soft glow of the streetlights, he thought to himself, sometimes the best revenge isn't a trap. It's simply watching a tyrant dig their own grave.